A CIA psychic spy sees 4 alien bases inside planet Earth. Excited, he reports it to his classified team. 48 hours later, Patrick Price, the legendary American psychic spy, is found dead. Hey, I know it sounds crazy, but please hear me out because Pat's story is one with CIA scientists as witnesses and legitimate CIA files as records. Actually, it was CIA personnel who later confirmed what Patrick saw on those alien bases, and it was CIA personnel who officially said that Patrick Price had died of a heart attack. But did he? We'll look into it, and I can't wait to show you a really dark side of the story that's been hidden until now. The evidence takes us back to the early 50s. By this time, Patrick Price was a young police officer with a super ability he just couldn't explain. Not confirmed, but it is said that as a police officer, he used to solve cases with his freaking mind.
Pat Price, he was ex-police commissioner of Burbank. And he said, when we were solving crimes, I would get an image of where the culprit might be hiding, and it would turn out to be correct. So maybe I have some of this ability.
Patrick was so unstoppable, he very quickly moved up in rank, from police officer to detective, all the way to police commissioner. CIA officers say that Patrick Price used to have this little newspaper clippings of all the cases he has solved with his mind. As impressive as this super unique officer was, Patrick's psychic abilities were still at level 1 compared to what he would be at 20 years later with the CIA. But the reason why this story begins in the 50s is because this is when Patrick's destiny with the CIA is set in motion. It's 1953. The mind-hacking project MK Ultra is launched, largely in response to US fears that the Soviet Union and later China were developing mind control techniques during the Cold War. The program was so dark, shocking, and apparently promising that other countries anxiously ran to build their own as fast as they could. 20 years went by. It's the early 70s. While Elvis entertained the President of the United States, classified psychic programs in rival countries entertained the idea of a psychic world war. Indeed, competition became too intense for the United States, and the only shot they got was MK Ultra. Except they shut it down. I hope you don't mind me sharing that my grandma, she used to tell me, your mom should have given you away at birth when that doctor wanted you. She also used to tell me that great stories have great heroes. And I promise you, this story, it is not the exception. Patrick Harold Price, a man of unwavering confidence, cordial disposition, and penetrating blue eyes. Patrick was described as a real-life superhero who proudly considered himself a super patriot, eager to help his country in the fight against communist conspiracy.
Look! Up in the sky!
Patrick was indeed the superhero, the psychic spy the US desperately needed against the Soviets. Patrick showed up at the CIA in very, very mysterious ways. I'm going to tell you about that later because that is a very serious twist. The point is that Patrick suddenly mysteriously shows up at this CIA-funded labs to do psychic tests. This is at Stanford Research Institute, SRI, which is in California. It's July 1974. The tests focus on remote viewing, which is when someone tries to see a place or object in their mind without actually being there. The target is a Soviet base the CIA called URDF-3, Unidentified Research and Development Facility Number 3. The task consists of drawing and describing the location, and of course, you better match the real place. But what Patrick doesn't know yet, unless he read their minds, if he passes this test, the CIA is going to make him a legitimate CIA psychic spy. Dr. Kenneth Kress, a top CIA scientist, said, "It was agreed that if Price described these structures, I would be prepared to have him sign a secrecy agreement. Patrick's dream is about to come true on a spring-like Tuesday morning in California. At 11 a.m., the psychic and the scientists begin the test. Most people online say that Patrick was given only coordinates. There were no clues, no photos, no images, nothing. But that's not true. Not true at all, actually. Indeed, the CIA gives Patrick a set of coordinates, the ones on screen. But researchers also show him maps of the area and even point at a river nearby. What they never share with Patrick were actual details of the structures in the area. In other words, he reportedly didn't know what buildings or potential technology looked like. The test goes on. Patrick goes on to do his thing. He closes his eyes, he focuses, puts on his glasses. I think he probably did it the other way. He put on his glasses, closes his eyes, and focuses. Pen and paper nearby. Remember, he's got to give descriptions and drawings of the area that better match. Patrick reports seeing cosmonauts in strange suits and even some kind of testing pool. Unfortunately, none of it matches what the CIA knows about the site. Reportedly, researchers in the room begin to freak out. Maybe all the psychic, remote view, and ESP stuff is nonsense. Is this Patrick even the right guy for this job?
Pretty soon, a guy in the back of the room jumps up and he says, "I know what this is. This is some kind of psyop test of our gullibility. And I want you to know, whoever's, putting this out, I'm not buying it." And he stormed out of the room.
Day 2, everyone meets again. Same time, same location, same focus. Patrick goes on to do his thing. He closes his eyes. He puts on his shades. And then he says, "I'm seeing a lot of things today I didn't see yesterday. I can see some very heavy, looks like railroad tracks, but they're spread much too wide, so it looks like a riding gantry." When researchers heard this, silence and shock took over the lab. The CIA team compared Patrick's descriptions and drawings with their classified satellite photos. Patrick's description actually matched a huge machine at the site.
I was given the results. The drawings showed the ability of a visual representation that appeared to be better than overhead imagery. In Pat Price's drawings, it was as if it was from inside his brain that the information was coming, not from his eyeballs overhead looking down.
The results of Patrick's test made history at the CIA.
So the sketch on the left is what Price produced, and this one is the one that is derived from the from the sketch from the photographic image. He said, "Oh, this is a huge crane." He said, "I saw somebody walk by and the guy only came up to the axle or something on the wheels, or up to the top of the wheels." Pat, what do you see about underground?
He said one of the big things they're doing here is making these 60-foot spheres out of steel. They're actually 58 feet.
A CIA analyst said that Patrick supplied the most positive evidence yet for remote viewing. He also said that such precision could not be possible unless, 1, he actually saw it through remote viewing, or 2, he was informed of what to draw by someone knowledgeable of URDF3. Dr. Kenneth Kress, the top CIA scientist who had promised to sign Patrick if he passed the test, I guess he wasn't very convinced about Patrick's performance or something, because he suddenly became a troll and he was like, "You know what? I'm just going to test Patrick one more time before I actually sign him up for the CIA contract." The doctor gathered a few researchers and Patrick in a meeting room. Dr. Kress's identity was a secret. Patrick had no chance, no idea of knowing who he was. And so the doctor decides to ask a few questions. He says, "I immediately asked Price if he knew me, and Price said yes." Kress asks, "My name?" Price replies, "Ken Kress." "My occupation?" Price replies, "Work for CIA." Doctor's finally convinced, so he hands Patrick his contract. "Please sign it. Welcome to the CIA." But then the doctor's like, "Hey, I know you signed the documents already, but I'm going to test you one more time. Why didn't you see the 4 derricks?" "Wait, I'll check," Patrick said. Price closes his eyes, puts on his glasses. He sees better this way, according to the documents. And in a few seconds, he said, I didn't see them because they are not there anymore. Patrick joined the CIA under Project Atlas, one of the CIA's early classified remote viewing programs. Actually, Atlas is one of a few programs that helped pave the way for what would later be known as Project Stargate. The next remote viewing tests for Patrick were set like a spectacular competition. Researchers set up a blind face-off between Patrick Price and other psychics. In each test, a target team secretly drives to a random location. The psychics stay behind, each alone in a room. They can't see or hear each other. The psychics now have to draw pictures and describe what comes to mind. Then there's a judge, and this judge has no idea who did which drawing. He also has to score the drawings and descriptions based on how well each match the real place.
And so he leans back in his chair, puts his glasses on, and I'm looking at him and I'm saying to myself, why does he put his glasses? He said, I put my glasses on because I can see better remotely when I have my glasses on.
Patrick freaking Price took first place 7 times out of 9 tests. His descriptions matched the real location more often and in way more detail than anyone else. I know, he was the man, our real psychic superhero. Or was he? We're going to take a look at that. But before we do that, I want to answer a question you asked yourself earlier. And that was, how is it that this whole coordinates situation with the psychics even works? What's going on there? Well, to answer that question, let me introduce you to Ingo Swann. He was a talented psychic who believed the unconscious mind works like a giant map. If you give it a set of numbers like coordinates, it knows where to go. Ingo said that the numbers don't really mean much to the thinking brain, but to your unconscious, they are a GPS address. They just follow the mental signal straight to the target, which is exactly what Patrick did on the next mind-blowing psychic test.
One day, Pat Price, during the remote viewing program, came in the office and he said, I got bored last night, so I started looking around, and I decided to look at the Oval Office. And as I kind of did my way around the Oval Office, I realized there's something in the Oval Office that will harm him, and he will not get through his second term. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, but I have to report that to a CIA contract manager, which I did. And so they sent a team over looking for, hidden microwaves, hidden toxic substances, and when they didn't come up with anything, of course, as we now know from history, it was the tape recorder that did him in. And he couldn't make it through his second term because he...
So this was during the Nixon administration?
Yeah, Nixon administration.
Wow.
And so interestingly enough, when he reported that to us, I said, oh my God, that means Spyro Agnew will be president because he was the vice president. And he says, no, he goes first. Now, it turned out he did go first because of some money laundering scheme. So when I sit down and try to say, okay, what are the statistics of having somebody see that a president is going to make it through his next term and his vice president is not going to take over because he goes first? I mean, the odds of that, there's just no doubt that means it's really something.
Very excited, the CIA gave Patrick a follow-up challenge, a follow-up mission. But no, it wasn't the 4 alien bases yet. And Patrick is given a very strange assignment. This is a U.S. location. He indeed gets his coordinates. He gets to work. The coordinates actually pointed to a cabin in the woods, but Patrick describes something else.
He says it's very secret and guards and fences around it. And I went inside and I looked through safes, and on the wall this was written.
Pat Price was brought in independently and went on to read documents hidden in the vault 3 floors below the surface.
The names on things in the files and so forth had to do with playing pool. There was a cue ball, a 9 ball, an 8 ball, and this, and different kinds of shots and everything. And when he showed that to his other CIA friends, he said, all those are top secret, classified, limb-dis names. Those are real names of a real project of Sugar Grove.
But as part of that, what he does is he says that he merged his mind, whatever you want to say, into a safe, and a whole bunch of words popped up into his mind. So he gave this whole list of words. Okay, fine. So he wrote them all down, set them off. Pretty soon the entire law enforcement apparatus of the country landed on us and said, how'd you get this information? This is highly classified project titles. Do you have a source inside? And no, we're just doing this experiment, and that's what he got.
So that's really interesting. Okay, okay, talk. What did you say? And I drove to the coordinates, and I found the cabin. And 100 meters down the road, I found a dirt road from the cabin. I drove down it, found the guardhouse, found the dish, found the accordion door.
Then came a new mission, Libya.
And Pat comes in with this description of an underwater sabotage training facility several kilometers away from the seacoast. And that information was passed on to the Libyan desk. They saw a facility, basically, where he said that they hadn't seen before.
The CIA checked and confirmed it. The CIA research team is excited. Everyone is so happy at the fact that things are working out with Patrick, tests are getting better, things are looking promising, opportunities are expanding, and so is money. Lots of money coming in to continue to fund the studies. As a matter of fact, they were like, you know what, Patrick should meet so-and-so, super important at the CIA to expand things further, and we should try this other mission. And everyone is really planning things beautifully, but right before all of it happened, Patrick dies. He was 56, July 14, 1975. America's greatest, most iconic psychic spy was gone. Official reports claim that Patrick died of a heart attack, but lots of people are suspicious, and not just anybody. CIA scientists are suspicious until this day.
And he was taken to the emergency room, which I visited. Speaking now as a criminologist, I would have investigated the hell out of it.
As soon as the CIA's top psychic was gone, they shut the project down. No more questions, no more sessions, at least for some time. And in the meantime, unofficial stories about Patrick's death begin to surface. The strongest version, which includes stories from CIA personnel, claims that Patrick reported 4 alien bases and did a few more missions. He then traveled back to Utah to visit his son on July 13. The next day, on July 14, the day he died, he flew from Utah to Nevada. He had dinner with CIA scientists Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ. He then goes to his hotel in Las Vegas, the Stardust Hotel. As he walks through the lobby, a man bumps into him. Very soon after, Patrick's feeling sick. He calls a fellow researcher by phone. This researcher was a man named Frank. He happened to be nearby because he also attended a very special event with Patrick. Patrick tells Frank about the incident with the man in the lobby and how he's not only feeling sick, but getting worse fast. By the time help arrives and Patrick makes it to the hospital, it's too late.
The emergency department people said that there was an individual that came in with him with a briefcase. He had a heart attack, so even though he died unattended in a hotel room, they decided, meaning the hospital and the police, to not make it a medical examiner case. So they didn't do an autopsy, although that's not correct. And the man disappeared with the briefcase, with the notes. Body was removed and cremated. And then they called his wife. Yeah, wow.
There's another version of Patrick's death by a former CIA officer, so we'll definitely check that later. But before we get to that version of Patrick's death, I want to get to the freaking aliens. Yes, the 4 alien bases, because you and I both know that there is something else Patrick saw before he died, and that was aliens. That story is nowhere to be found in official records. However, that story does live in the memories and books of very solid CIA personnel.
Pat Price walked into SRI. He came in and on Putoff's desk. He said, "You might be interested in this. I've been interested in this for a while, and I've found 4 UFO bases." He described them as inside areas where 4 different kinds of groups of people who had different duties had inside places, that they were inside these mountains. They had different jobs that they did in 4 different bases.
Oh my God, I've got to report this to my CIA contract monitor. Do I want to tell him that? And so I did, and one of the places he came up with but one of the places he came up with was Mount Zeal in Australia. And so my CIA contract monitor says, well, I know the CIA station keeper out in Australia. I think I'll call him, and I won't tell him why I'm asking, but I'll ask him about Mount Zeal area. So he gave him a call, and he said, I'd like to ask you about that Mount Zeal area. He says, oh, you mean where the UFOs are always flying around?
But by the time he got through with going through all the targets, he says, they just don't want to be discovered. They don't want people around the planet to know that they're there. In other words, there's lots of things that they say, and like one of them is their home base is Mars, and I don't necessarily believe that.
This doesn't end there, because then there's a project called 8200, it happens later, early 1980s, and the whole purpose of that project is to find out if what Patrick reported to the CIA about those alien bases was true.
This Project 8200 thing was something that I did, creating the names of the mountains where these UFO bases were, asking Stargate remote viewers, giving them coordinates to go to, and have them describe what's there. I'm going to read this as a summary of one of those people. Site is a mountain. It is bitter cold and windy, much wind and snow. The mountain is hollow. It is a large cave or crater. This has huge rooms and walls, curved high ceilings. There is an opening into the caves. The cavern is clear, sterile. There's equipment and different points there in the corridor. Some of the equipment is for monitoring, other support may be for life support. There are silver metallic ships. They are used to transport people and equipment. There are some people here. They are thin, unemotional, and have programmed feelings. They are strange and have a pre-designed mission. They are freezing and cooling, semi-isolated. They feel unearthly. The site has a research feeling. The people are benign and serious and are interrelated. These program thoughts people can use telepathy to tell you to turn left instead of to turn right, or you don't see anything here, some sort of program telepathy. And again, they don't seem to be dangerous or concerned with hurting us in any way. Just don't get discovered.
So far, the story of Patrick Price has been one of psychic bonanza, superhero, super patriot acts. What if the story we've been told by documents and witnesses has been a cover-up for something darker and much more dangerous, like the fact that the CIA quietly ran a follow-up analysis on Patrick's URDF-3 test? To remind you, this is the test where Patrick remote viewed an area owned by the Soviets. And what did the CIA find? Aside from the giant gantry Patrick described, The CIA found that most of Patrick's data was wrong. The analysts concluded that the remote viewing experiment on URDF3 by Patrick Price proved to be unsuccessful. This conclusion was reached only after a careful review of the tape recordings, tape transcripts, and sketches that were generated during the 4-day experiment. These CIA reports describe a very different Patrick. This is a Patrick who avoided answering specific questions or kept repeating the same details researchers had already given him. So what did the CIA do after getting that report? They cut the program. Then quietly, very quietly, they moved Patrick to a different contract. He went from working full-time to becoming a freelancer. That way the CIA had more control about his involvement and he was more of an external piece. By the way, this happened in just a few months. We're talking late 1974 to early 1975. My question is, was this the CIA realizing there's massive infiltration going on? Or is this the CIA trying to hide the abilities of a superhuman? To give you and myself some clues, I think we need to talk about who Patrick Harold Price really was, because he was not just a police officer with psychic abilities who moved from Utah to California. No, not at all. He was a high-ranking Scientologist, friend, and he came from one of the most elite Mormon bloodlines in America. We are talking about American Mormon royalty. Patrick's great-great-grandfather, Jeremiah Hatch, was a highly influential early Mormon who helped found Salt Lake City in Utah. He's actually been described by media as being known in every American household back then. Now, here's where things get really interesting between Patrick's family and U.S. intelligence. Turns out Patrick Price has cousins from his royal Mormon lineage on both Republican and Democrat sides. The most famous cousin is Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, who happens to be one of the longest-serving senators in U.S. history. Turns out, Orrin Hatch was very well connected with the U.S. intelligence community. He attended a classified intelligence meeting in 1977, 2 years after his cousin Patrick Price died. The meeting was about human abuse in MK studies. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. On top of it, Orrin Hatch has been very, very vocal about restricting access to classified information from places like the CIA, FBI, NSA, all to prevent leaks. But that's not all. He even helped the NSA open its largest data center in history. This happened in 2013. This is the same year when Edward Snowden, a whistleblower from the NSA, leaked information about the NSA spying severely on American citizens. Well, the NSA, thanks to former Senator Orrin Hatch, was able to open its largest data center in Utah. And it happened in an area with a high concentration of Mormons, actually Salt Lake City. There's reports that there's like something between 40 and 60% of the population there is Mormons, which is awesome. It's great people, by the way. This area is so Mormon that just 30 minutes from the NSA data center, you'll find Brigham Young University, or BYU. And what is BYU? It's a Mormon university that proudly ranks among the CIA's top recruiting sources. That means that's where the CIA loves going shopping for new personnel. I must clarify that this is not the only place where the CIA gets people from, but it's one of the top choices. It is said that the reason why the CIA loves recruiting Mormons is because their youth have a lifestyle that makes them ideal for intelligence work. They don't do drugs, they're loyal and obedient. But of course I looked it up for you, and it turns out that the Mormon youth is facing the same drug issues other young people are. Maybe less than other communities, but they're still affected. By the way, I keep saying Mormons because it's the common term, it's what you and I can understand, but the proper name for this beautiful and personally beloved community is Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as LDS Church. Just wanted to put it out there. I just want to clarify that I'm not trying to say that the LDS Church or Mormon community is trying to take over the United States. What I am trying to say is that they have a lot of opportunities and connections to enter U.S. intelligence. And you know, with all those connections, the same tied community all over the government, even in the intelligence side of it, it just makes me wonder, is that how Patrick Price was able to fool the CIA? Because that would make him a very well-connected spy. Think about it. Every single psychic test Patrick passed involved American-owned sites. Even the ones located on foreign soil were American. Is it coincidence, or could it be a very tight, close, loyal community of informants within the intelligence community? And of course, I looked into the psychic tests Patrick failed. They were all foreign locations, not owned by the United States. Maybe, just maybe, being a foreign place not owned by the US, you got no informants, no intel, no information. Actually, there's a CIA report about a terrible incident in which an Air Force officer was kidnapped in Beirut. People at the Air Force are freaking out, government's freaking out, they don't know what to do, they're running out of options, so they're like, forget it, bring in the freaking psychics. So they call in Patrick Price. Air Force gives him a brief, a bunch of information. Patrick focuses, he does his thing, but nothing he reported from his remote viewing was useful, at least according to the document. So what about the Soviet place he got right? URDF was indeed a Soviet foreign site that Patrick eventually got right. But he got it wrong on day one, and only until day two did he suddenly get it right. Is it these hypothetical informants? But even if so, how could they have known what the Soviet base looked like? Well, turns out the CIA did have satellite images from the start. Did it take Patrick's hypothetical contacts one day to get their hands on them? Regardless, in this potential scenario, why would Patrick Price want to infiltrate the CIA? Well, don't forget that he was a high-ranking Scientologist. Scientology is a group that has stolen classified files from the US government in the past. Former CIA scientist Russell Targ says Patrick Price weirdly showed up at his lab after two psychics mysteriously canceled on him. Suddenly, there was a replacement, Ingo Swann and Patrick Price. Patrick Price arrived with former CIA scientist Hal Puthoff. All three men had one thing in common. They share the same woman. No, they didn't. They were all Scientologists. Were they all in it? Or were Hal and Ingo just chess pieces in Patrick's game? According to Targ, Patrick had strongly believed that his life was in danger. He added, "We don't know if he had a heart attack or was killed, either by the Russians who knew full well what he was up to, or by the CIA who had discovered that Pat was passing secret information to his Scientology church." He ends with a brutal question.
If it turns out that Superman is a double agent, what do you do?
But wait, there's still a big possibility that this real-life X-Men, Patrick Super Patriot Price, was real, was not just superhuman, but super mega incredibly and dangerously talented. So powerful and so dangerous that you might as well hide it. You might as well fake his death, but also fake reports about failed psychic tests. Could it be that the CIA wanted to hide its ultimate weapon? And why do I say this?
Russell Targ tells the story that then they took him and they cremated him and buried him in an unmarked grave. And he went looking for the grave. And see, there's the grave that says 155, and it doesn't say anything about it.
If I were you, I would go to the locations that people said that he was buried and see what's there.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do that?
Nope. I put Pat Price's picture in an envelope and gave that sealed envelope to Joe and asked Joe to describe where the person in the picture was. Tell me where he is. He's in an underground office in Virginia somewhere.
What do you think? Let me know what's your theory on this case. I would love to read it. I would love to dissect them all. Apologies ahead of time for any mistakes in my reporting. I'm currently doing this by myself, but I do welcome and actually ask and encourage for feedback. So if you have any, kindly share it with me. Thank you for existing, and I hope to see you soon.